Motion passes 10-0. Approval of the minutes dated October 23rd, 2019. Moved by Gillette, supported by Kraft. Please vote. Motion passes 10-0. Public participation. Does anyone wish to be heard? Anyone wish to be heard? Seeing none, we'll close public participation. Budget reviews. We're going to start with Chief Deputy Executive Mr. Delden to talk with us about the recommended budget review parameters. And, okay. Does he have this, Crystal? Does he need this?
You passed it out at the first workshop? Yep. This one here, I think?
Yes.
Yep, got it.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you, Commissioner Kleinfeld. Our office was asked by your office to address the board to explain whether or not we, meaning the county executive, followed the resolution that the Board of Commissioners passed back in May of this year, setting some parameters for the preparation and submission of the 2020 budget by the Office of County Executive. The sheet that I'm referring to is the one that I'm sure that all of you have, and it looks like you did your own assessment of whether or not the budget meets those parameters. With all due respect, it's the opinion of the county executive that the parameters in this resolution express merely the intent, the advice, the preferences or wishes of the commission and are non-binding to the executive's office. So that being said, that's the executive's position. We don't feel that the Board of Commissioners can no more direct the actions of the county executive than the executive can direct the actions of this board. And I don't believe in 8.5 years that we have ever directed you to do something a certain way. We don't feel that you can prescribe how the executive does his job through non-binding resolutions. But really, this particular issue, as I see it, as our office sees it, is a symptom of a larger problem between the Board of Commissioners and the Office of County Executive, and I'd like to speak to that. And I think that I speak to it with some experience because I came in here day one under this new form of government, and I have been, for the executive, I have been the primary liaison between our office and this Board of Commission. There was a time when the board office used to meet with us, meaning the executive finance director, to mutually agree on a budget submission date before the board adopted the budget calendar. That didn't happen this year. There was a time when the board office met with us and asked if we would consider expansion of line items, more detailed line items in the budget. And after much discussion and talking about some things that we felt we needed, an agreement was reached, and we expanded the line items. There was a time when the board office used to request a meeting with me or representatives of the executive's office at least twice a month. It doesn't happen anymore. Instead, the past 2 or 3 years have been fraught with tension, lawsuits, excessive legal fees, and so on. Our office resents that the Board of Commissioners has employed selective enforcement of its policies, ordinances, and agreements. And I can just give you a couple of examples. Martha Teaberry recently spent $4 to $5 million of money they received through some reimbursement, spent it on renovations, and now they don't have any money to meet their OPEB obligations for the county. But interestingly enough, the joint operating agreement that is between Martha T. Berry of the Human Service Board and this board requires them to bring before you the renovation project. We don't believe that happened. Some members of this board promoted and were encouraging the finance department to pay legal fees for an elected official without a signed contract, a violation of the charter. In recent years, like 2018, right before our very eyes, community mental health eroded approximately a $15 million fund balance to meet their needs. But they're not held to the same standard that the board is requiring the executive to abide by, and that is to grow the fund balance 1% over the previous year. So in our mind, it's selective enforcement. In closing, and I've said this to some of you, there isn't one problem that exists between your office or our office that if willing minds come to the table, we cannot solve. We can solve anything if willing minds. It's been my opinion, and again, I speak from 8.5 years' experience, and not all of you have been there that long. We've had that in the last 8.5 years. We haven't had it in the last couple of years. So that being said, things will continue on, I assume, as they have. And that's unfortunate because it really is a distraction from the good work that our 2,500 employees do to provide services to all of our residents in this county. And when there's distractions in the top leadership level of any organization, don't think for a moment that doesn't trickle down and it impacts our employees, and we're doing them a disservice. And eventually we're doing the residents of this community or county a disservice. That really is all I have to say. If you have any questions or clarification, I'd be happy to.
Commissioner Gillette?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mr. Deldon, for your perspective in response to the request to appear before us today. I would concur with you that there hasn't been the level of communication interaction between the board and the executive that would be preferable, I think, to everybody involved. And I think that is the reason, and one of the things that was a concern to at least myself and I think a number of other commissioners was that we did not go into this budget process and then surprise the anybody in the executive department or waylay people or wait till the budget's submitted and then wham, we have a bunch of suggestions at the last minute. So I think the thought of putting together this group and then coming up with parameters was an attempt to speak through, have the board speak through its resolutions. If we can't get the communication, the speech at the informal level or at some other formal level, the only way to speak and to express our position moving forward on budget issues was through a resolution. So that was our effort to communicate. So it's not it wasn't attempting to usurp any authority of the executive. It was to communicate what our position is moving forward in the budget as early as possible, to make sure there was as much time as possible so that we didn't get accused of, of essentially, waylaying something at the last minute. So that's not really a question, I suppose. It's more of a response and explanation of, I think, why the board felt it was necessary to pass a resolution early on to be as fair as possible, early in the budget process as possible.
Commissioner, thank you for your thoughts and your perspective. There was a time when we used to have those informal conversations as we were preparing the budget and discuss what we thought the challenges were going to be for that year so that there were no surprises when the budget was submitted to the board. This budget that we submitted, as I'm sure you know, I don't really need to say it, but it meets every requirement of the charter and every requirement of state law. So this budget complies and meets all of the obligations that the county executive has.
Well, I don't know about the meetings that happened in the past. I just know it was important for us to establish communication and engage in the process as early in the process as possible. And yes, no one disputes whether the budget, violates state law. We're not here, we're governed by other things other than just the law. But yeah, I would hope that in the absence of any other mechanism, that the resolution of the board, the expressed interest of the board, would have been a significant factor in the development of the budget. Thank you.
Okay, Chair Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Delden, for your comments. I'd like to first start with communication's a two-way street. So I want to make sure that everybody realizes that we really haven't, at least personally, and you may have, all the commissioners may have received calls on the side, but we don't get any calls from the executive's office asking about things that we do. Why, maybe why did you do this? We tried to talk about this resolution. As a matter of fact, I put one of the newer people on our board in charge of a resolution that we could send down to the executive's office on not demanding what they do, but notifying them what we would be looking to accept in a budget, and we would hope to have some conversation about. Now, Harold, I don't know if you got any feedback from that, but like Leon said, we did this early on, and I never received a call from the executive's office either. So we can talk about going back and forth, and we can talk about how great it was in the past, but I'm sure if Kathy Vosberg was sitting right here, she wouldn't really echo your comments about how great it has been up until 2 or 3 years ago. Last year, when we talked about the parameters that we would be looking to adopt the budget around, I remember the conversation being that we were going to roll up, not only were we not going to do it, but we're going to roll up all the things that we gave in the past, like the expanded line items and things like that. So there wasn't really a discussion. It was, if you tell us what you want, and that's really what we were asking. We were telling you guys what we would like to see. The response to that was, we're going to give you less then. And I see this board in the last 3 or 4 years starting to actually maybe exert a little bit of their legislative authority, right? And I know that there's a lot of people that don't really think the board has any legislative authority, but we keep hearing the budget is our authority. So a couple years ago, we hired a company and looked at the capital projects and realized that the way we were doing things was not a good way to do things, and we changed that. And we had the capital projects put into a separate fund so that before they were spent, they actually had to come before the board, like the contracting policy says. I argue that since the board has started taking a little bit of an interest in doing things and how things are done, that's also when the communication started slowing down around here. I don't think there's anybody on this board that doesn't welcome a phone call from the 8th floor ever to talk about things. But just like the executive's office, we are always told that we're wrong when we're doing things. You can't do things this way. This is how, we get told a lot on how a legislative body should be, right? And that we don't tell you how an executive body should be. I'm not saying you, Mark. I'm not just saying you, all right? So I'm just telling you, you don't have all the conversations that we've all had, right? And we've heard it a bunch of times. So you spoke about lawsuits, all these lawsuits. We've never filed a lawsuit against the executive's office. We've done a few things that we thought we should be able to do, and we've had lawsuits filed against us. As far as selective enforcement of ordinances, I mean, we're going to have to look at CMH and what their responsibilities are to come before us on these things, so I can't really speak to that. But I will say, when we talk about hiring lawyers for other entities, just recently we find in the budget that for the last 9 years that this new charter's been in place, we've been paying an outside law firm a retainer fee of $1,500 a month for the sheriff department every month. Never came before this board once, right? So it says, it's pretty clear in the charter that some things are going on all over that everybody is not quite sure on what they should be doing. All I'm saying is that this isn't a one-way street. The communication didn't just stop from this floor while you were begging to talk to us all the time. And what we put in here for sure was not a demand. This was what the board decided we would look at this budget through these eyes or through this lens. And we wanted to let you, as Commissioner Drollet said, we wanted to let you know as soon as possible this is the things we would be looking at. Now, not once did we hear back, well, we can't do this, we don't believe we should have to do this, or, man, this isn't going to work this year. Can we come to some kind of agreement on this? I mean, that's another thing that
We are not going to ask you for permission to relax the resolution that is non-binding for the executive.
It's not binding. You are correct.
I had said in my statements, Commissioner Smith, that you cannot prescribe how the county executive should be doing his job, how we should build the budget, what it should look like, what format you want it in. And repeatedly, I don't want to take up the whole afternoon, but I could give repeated examples on how through resolutions that you have tried to prescribe how the executive is going to do his job. And that is not your authority. I don't tell you how to do your job. That's why we don't make phone calls up here and ask you to do things a certain way. You hear from us in these public meetings, at these podiums. You have the opportunity to ask questions or grill any of our department heads over an issue before you make a decision. Again,
we didn't prescribe any mandated thing that you would send to us. What we did, and I think Commissioner Hall was, leading this, is we thought that these would be reasonable things for which the board would like to see. You don't have to do it. We didn't say you had to do it, but that's how we would start looking at the budget. Those are the things we would like to start seeing. And the conversation started and ended right there.
Let me just,
Well,
if I may.
You two could go on all day
Yeah,
long.
we could.
I have a few things to say. Commissioner Hall has a few things to say. I want to let you wrap up, but you say something and then he says something, and I think we're getting into a back and forth that won't end. So, do you want to wrap up?
I'm wrapped for now.
I just want to say that successful organizations are built on relationships and effective communication. And we can have the smartest people around these tables here in this room. But if there's a lack of respect and there's no communication, we're not getting anything done. Nothing. And I don't think that we can move forward until the relationship is rebuilt. It's never too late. My door is always open.
The lack of respect goes both ways. And I would say that the board has felt several times over the last years a complete lack of respect also. So you speak as if this was a one-way street, and I will just say, and most of us here know it, it is certainly not.
Okay. I'm gonna touch on only the attorney contract because most of what you're talking about, I don't think sits on my shoulders or is something that I had it. This particular one, I was out of town when I got the phone call on it, and this was specifically the lawsuit where the Corp Counsel had filed a counterclaim, which even by his own admission created a conflict of interest situation. What I gave approval for is the finance chair because it was one of those emergency bypasses,
Right.
Only I demanded that the full board vote on it as soon as our first meeting. I didn't say, okay, bypass and just let it go. What I gave permission for was for him to file a response just through the end of that week, and then we would take it up the following Monday. My understanding was there was a letter of engagement, not a contract, a letter of engagement. The following Monday, that attorney stood in front of us and said, it's basically over. Nothing more is taking place. So I thought, okay, over and done, and we had accomplished our goal on that particular one. There were subsequent ones that I was not here for, that I don't necessarily agree with the decisions were made, but I just wanted, you brought up that specific one. And my position on all of these, because we know that we had that $1.5 million contract that didn't come to the board, my position was, we know these things have been happening. Let's try to correct them and move forward and not beat each other up about it. So you can imagine my surprise when the 1.5 was still out there, getting hit over the head over a $10,000 issue that clearly we were trying to do the right thing on. So that particular one, because there have been so many contracts and not just the county exec's department, there's blame to go around. There have been so many contracts that haven't been properly approved one way or the other, that particular one I take offense to being weaponized, and I think you understand that.
I do.
Okay.
Commissioner Kleinfeld, thank you for your comments. I respect what you have to say. There was a time a couple of years ago when we engaged a small group of representatives from the executive's office and a small group of commissioners, because to this day, we feel that the contracting and the purchasing ordinance is conflicting. And we've tried to get a better understanding of what it means, because we are not, I can tell you right now, no department of county government is following that to a T, because we need clarification. The response that I received from this office to the executive was, write an ordinance and we'll take a look at it. That's not our job. The charter gives the Board of Commissioners that responsibility. But again, if there was a willingness with a small group of people that takes the purchasing and contracting ordinance line by line and dissect it and get dialogue from the people that use it all the time, our department heads, our finance and purchasing department, we can fix it. That was over 2 years ago.
Okay, so number one, point taken. And number two, I don't disagree with you. I think they're unusually long. I said that when we were approving. I know there were attorneys involved in that, and attorneys like to write a lot. So I don't disagree that they should be simplified. And I think that is something that we could work on. And I know that it was brought up, and I know that there was a failure to address that. So I think we can agree that there's been failures on both sides. And the last one I want to talk about is with respect to the relationships. I believe there are individual relationships that I'm not so sure can be repaired. And I think, I don't know what we all do to address that situation. The way that I've gone about it, because I've got my own issues, is I'm going to be professional. I'm not going to let my guard down and be over friendly anymore, but I'm going to be professional and polite. And I think if we can get there with everybody, then maybe we can start those relationships again. And maybe a handful of us have to talk to a handful of you to see, but I don't know who should participate, because there's a lot of anger, and there's a whole lot of outlying reasons for that. So I don't have an answer. I'm acknowledging there's a situation, and I'm also acknowledging it's deeper than just all of this. But let me call on Commissioner Ha.
Thank you, Chairman, and I commend you on being professional and polite. That was just what I just heard. I thought somebody should write that down, but that's okay. And thank you for being here. I also want to thank the committee of commissioners that diligently worked on, in all sincerity, the desires of the board, as Commissioner Toulette said. I agree with him. Our intent was to supply information early on in the process so as to prevent from what I had previously been told was the process where we go through massive budget discussions with department heads, ourselves, and then we get to the end of the process and multiple amendments get presented. And then the amendments go to you guys and they get it rejected and come back. I'm a bottom line guy. I may be the new guy chairing this committee, but I've got 40 years of legislative compliance and regulatory experience between my two careers. So in all sincerity, and these were well discussed, well thought out, many of us disagreed and reduced our positions, or compromised would be a better word, positions to prepare this document. I had requested that you appear and explain your thoughts on the document. And yes, I have talked to Steve about that document, as well as other items within the budget, to try and get an understanding of how can we be so close but yet so far apart. That's why the wording of that document, and we have debated this internally, and I have it in front of me, reads the desires of the board. So that when Steve and company started, and we tried to do this before the budget process got too far. Items like recommend the budget not to exceed revenues coming in versus expenditures. The fund balance was decreased 0.91%. That I think we figured that out to be $1 million, 2 million, whatever it was. The recommended budget, it was 1.7. I had it here. So the thought process was, having submitted that, are those desires achievable? And again, I counted, I think we've got 12 more pre-finance budget meetings. And I'm still looking because I have applauded, as Steve's aware, having been to all but one, the departments on coming in with a neutral budget. I think we saw a big increase today of $6,000 in one, or 65, I don't know which. So with the process in the state of us making our desires known, you having looked at it, and all I've got is a sheet here that says no, 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 that we prepared. You didn't prepare that. I'll make that clear. Is it achievable to meet any of these recommendations? Are suggestions being sought or not being sought? And from a process standpoint, coming up with amendments 2 days prior to voting on a budget is no way to do business. So I guess I'm posing the question, is the executive office amenable to rational suggestions on how to achieve or come closer to the desired wishes of the board? And I ask that question, Mark, because the knowledge of sitting through these budget hearings is irreplaceable. It's great to meet the department heads. It's great to hear how they have achieved this budget. I understand, having worked on budgets my whole life, they're a huge pain, but a necessity for a department head. And at General Motors, what our boss did was say, here's last year's, here's this year's, find a way to make it meet, which I'm sure that's what Steve and each one of the department heads have done. So my question is, these desires that have been expressed here, is there an opportunity to discuss these further.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Hall. We can discuss things. The budget is the budget right now. Many of you have already told me this is the leanest budget that's been submitted by the executive in 9 years. This is the first time in 9 consecutive budgets that there are no new positions in this budget, although that many were requested that we've said no to, meaning budgets that have to be supported, positions that have to be supported by the general fund. We said no. You know what's going on with capital projects. We cut the heck out of it. We're doing it the most critical. We've got we don't need to go into the jail, but most of the $5.5 million in capital projects is being spent at the jail. It's a lean budget. We couldn't get to zero.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Before I call on you, Leon, that was the one thing I meant to touch on. I looked at that as, if these are things that you guys did accomplish, we're not going to go through the rigmarole of all these meetings. Not as a dictate or a mandate. I think the way some of us sent it, and there's been different terminology by different commissioners, but the way some of us sent it, I think it wasn't received that way. I thought of it more like the legislative branch and the governor and saying, look, if you can achieve this, we're not going to question you on anything. I think that's what I was trying to say, and I think that's what a lot of commissioners, and I failed to mention that. Commissioner Drollet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks again, Mark. I concur with Commissioner Haw in the spirit of which the committee was put together and the intent of the committee, which really was an intent of communication. The goal of the resolution was communication. It was to make the communication clear and help us take 13 people and synthesize, a bunch of different thoughts and priorities about what the budget should or shouldn't be. A process that we have, the end resulting role in. We've got to approve that budget. So how can we take 13 different people's opinions and thoughts and priorities about what they think the budget, what shape the budget should move forward in? So we thought, let's get together early. Let's establish this. Let's have a conversation. Let's discuss it. Let's vote on it so that there was no unclear communication on part of any in any way. So that was an effort to communicate with the executive branch. And obviously the communication was passed by the board, it was sent there, and we didn't hear anything back till the budget arrived. Mm-hmm. That is communication as well. The budget coming is communication. So I guess I could say that at this point, given the problems with communication that, seem to exist, we as a board, or at least I as a commissioner, am forced to communicate through our official actions.
That's fine.
And that's how I assume the executive is communicating, through his actions. We're not left with any other way of doing it. So our intent was to communicate through an official action the priorities that this board would have in approaching the budget process, with the hope that that would streamline the budget process and make it easy, for all of us, when we got to this point.
Commissioner, I appreciate that, and I respect your opinion. We all know that before that day, by the time that day comes about what's going to be cut out or added to the budget, not all discussion happens here. It happens sometimes two of you in the coffee shop, conversations with a commissioner or two in my office or me in their office. You formalize it by putting it in writing, but it goes a long way when you can take the formality out of it and have a cup of coffee and a sandwich with somebody and talk about things that are important to each other. That's what's missing here. That's what's missing.
Well, it might be missing, and I agree that those conversations are important. But from the perspective of the, when you take Commissioner Carabelli's phrase, zoom out 10,000 feet or whatever it is, I can't speak for my colleagues in a coffee shop. I can't speak for my colleagues in a private meeting. I can bring my thoughts to my colleagues in the form of, hey, let's do this resolution, or let's do that, let's do this. And we debate it, and we talk about it, and people argue about it, and then ultimately there's a vote on it. And that's how the commission speaks.
Right. I respect that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Leonetti?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In part, some of the sessions that we've had an hour before these meetings through the finance chair is good. I'm glad to see that you're there. I mean, that's a
They are
great
very good.
opportunity for us to discuss a lot of things. And as Commissioner Drollet says, it gives us all an idea of where we all stand as a legislative body. Because like he said, I would love to meet with you, but you and I could talk about some things we really want or like, or the executive likes, but the rest of the board might not feel that way. So I think it's very important that we have to understand we're a collective body. You know what I mean? And I do agree with what you said earlier. We all work together well when we can reach a consensus. We've got 13 people on here we have to reach a consensus with. So if anything, the meetings that we've had a good hour before we've come in here to understand things a little bit better in the budget, it's a formal meeting. It's open to the public, but it's been a great opportunity for some people to learn a little bit of stuff from the department heads in a little bit more detail, learn from finance a little bit more what's going on. But you have to understand, meeting with you individually doesn't necessarily work for the whole collective body.
I understand that.
Okay, thank you.
And first, and I'm going to finalize this, but I'm going to get a motion to receive and file by Leonetti, supported by Gillette. I just wanted to say, well, with respect to the one thing that we didn't touch on was the dates of the budget meetings. It put me in a jam to get that budget the last day at 4:30. There is no question about it. Our staff knows it put me in a jam. And I guess part of that is because it was a response to a budget meeting set up and no communication. So we can't fix that for this year. And I don't know about the budget, but it kind of sounds like you guys are set in your ways that there isn't going to be any changing of this particular budget. We might have to shoot for next year and how we get past this. So I think it was a productive conversation, and with that, we'll vote on the receive and file. Yeah, it's consider, yeah. Motion passes 11-0. Okay, item B, Ethics Board. Welcome. Before he starts, let me go ahead and get the motion to receive and file by Romano, supported by Carabelli. Go ahead, Doctor.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. My name is Dr. Amboyer, and with me today, as you know, we have Dory Nolan, who is also the Vice Chair of the Ethics Board. On a lighter note, I'd like to mention, and I'm really proud to say, I first began doing this way back in 1973 as a department head in circuit court, representing the probation department and coming before the board, and presenting the goals and objectives and asking for funds. Back then, at least from my perspective, it was much more difficult in dealing with 25 commissioners as opposed to 13. So, in any event, I would like to share with you, and not to belabor past discussions and meetings with the chairman of the board, Bob Smith, and others relative to the Ethics Board recommendations for enhancement or modifications to it. My intent is not to really belabor that, but we do have a rather unique situation in the sense that the Ethics Board probably has the dubious honor, if you will, in some sense, to appear before you, having spent the least amount of money of all commissions and departments in the county. So far this year, according to our illustrious finance department, we've spent less than $50. So we're rather proud of that in some sense. On the other hand, what we would like to do is really to attain the goals and objectives that we outlined to the board last year as well as this year as it relates to further consideration to enhance the ethics ordinance, commonly known as the Enrolled Ordinance 2016-3. As you're all aware, each of the departments are required to submit their goals and objectives for the coming year, and we did. And I presume that each of the commissioners did receive the goals and objectives for the Ethics Board, and if you didn't, I'd just like to briefly reiterate what they are. In terms of the biggest accomplishment, if you will, that the Ethics Board has attained during the past year, we did submit suggested revisions to the Ethics Ordinance to the Macomb County Board of Commissioners for consideration as to how better to manage and resolve complex ethics issues as exemplified in 2018. The goals that we elicited for 2020 were to fulfill the duties and responsibilities recommended for the revision of the Ethics Ordinance as it may be adopted by the Board of Commissioners, to adopt new rules and procedures for the ordinance that would be approved by the Board of Commissioners, to reinstate ethics training for all public servants, being all county elected officials, appointed officials, and county employees of the future in collaboration with Human Resources and Labor Relations. We have an excellent relationship with the Department of Human Resources, and we've had discussions about the potential for, once again, engaging in online training if, in fact, a new ethics ordinance is involved. As you know, we originally had one with the online training program for the original ethics ordinance. There was over several hundred county employees and elected officials, appointed officials that participated into that online training program. It was very well received. They received certificates of appreciation from the county executive as well as the Board of Commissioners for that accomplishment. But we had to suspend it because of the changes that took place with the ethics ordinance of 2016. What we would like to do, if in fact that there is a revision to the ordinance in the future, is to reinstate that online training program in collaboration with Human Resources and Labor Relations. We would also like to increase the awareness of the ethics ordinance so that all elected officials, appointed officials, and county employees know what it is and are able to abide by that. In the past, we worked in conjunction with the planning department and had a successful campaign to enlighten all elected officials, appointed officials, and county employees in terms of what the ethics ordinance is and seek their cooperation to conduct all affairs of the county in an ethical manner in accordance with the ordinance. We would like to reinstate that, and we'd also like to attend workshops and training sessions specifically designed for county government that occur around the nation. What is very interesting, and I think might be given some consideration by the Board of Commissioners, is that there are very, very few counties that have an ethics ordinance, certainly as good as ours. Very, very few counties, and I hope that someday in the future that there be some consideration given to the Ethics Board being awarded a NACO award for that effort, and also to serve as a model for other counties around the nation. With the current ethics ordinance, or one that might be in the future, we really do have a good one, and we've done a lot of research in relative to that matter in terms of making recommendations in conjunction with Corporation Counsel, who has been very, very helpful in terms of proposing a new ethics ordinance for the Board of Commissioners to consider. And we'd like to continue working with the Office of Corporation Counsel in that matter, who has also been extremely helpful to the Ethics Board over the years, and particularly 2 years ago when we had a number of very complex ethics cases, if you'll recall, regarding 2 elected officials and some other situations. Corporation Counsel was extremely helpful. We didn't have to seek out outside counsel. It saved the county a lot of money because of the expertise and diligence of Corporation Counsel, and we really appreciate that. And we'd like to continue that relationship in the future as well. There have been some challenges in terms of complying with the enrolled ordinance. There's also been some challenges in terms of recruiting Ethics Board members, and there's also been some challenges in terms of preventing any kind of political interferences of duties and responsibilities of the Ethics Board for the well-being of Macomb County government. So those are the accomplishments, the goals, the long-term goals, the challenges and risks that the Ethics Board has experienced. We did initially submit a budget in hopes that we were able to accomplish these goals, but working in cooperation with the Finance Department, what we have done is to lessen the amount of monies that we were requesting from the board until such time, and if and when the Board of Commissioners refines or amends the current ethics ordinance, because we don't need the money until that time. So what we've done is significantly reduced our request to merely $5,000, and I'm not sure that we're going to spend that, but we're taxpayers and we're frugal, and that's why we want to continue the relationship once again with Corporation Counsel and Planning Department and Human Resources to use the resources we have in the county as opposed to outside, to also limit the amount of funds necessary for the Ethics Board to be successful. So with that, is there any questions or concerns?
Okay, yes. First of all, there may have been a little miscommunication, and I know it's been a long time since we were actually working on the ordinance. There seemed to be a feeling on this end that we went through and we did these things and sent it over, and we didn't hear back from you, and you were waiting to hear from us. And I'm not saying anybody's, okay, that not necessarily anybody's at fault, but we just need to get back on the wagon and take care of
With all
business.
due respect, Commissioner, I feel that we are in great communication with the Chairman of the Board of Commissioners, Bob Smith. We've
Okay.
had several meetings with him.
Well, I wasn't.
We've had some recommendations that we've posed to him. We have some additional ones, and I feel that we have responded.
I wasn't trying to suggest that anybody wasn't communicating with anybody. I had asked her why we on our end had not brought it forward, because you were bringing it up. And so I was just saying there was a little confusion. I'm not blaming anybody. I was just saying there was a little confusion. So please don't be defensive. You know what happens
Okay,
when
I'm
that.
trying to respect that,
Okay,
but-
I was not actually insulting anybody or getting on anybody. I just indicated there was some confusion. He seems to have the answer to the confusion, so I'm going to call on him now. Thank you, Chair Smith.
Thank you, Dr. Ambroyer. Dory, thank you. So we have been going back and forth with this ordinance, and we haven't brought it to the board yet because we keep having new questions, which is fine. I mean, every time we want to make sure that if we're doing this and we're in this process, we're going to have the right answers and at least what we feel and you feel really mainly is the best product to present. Recently, I think Dory had asked a few questions about some of the changes and what they meant. We are now in the process of getting that answer back to you, and then I got an email from you the other day regarding Macomb Township's new ethics ordinance, and since it's open, we might as well keep that door cracked and see what we're gonna have a quick meeting about that and talk about their ethics ordinance and see if there's, before we do this and have to do it again in 6 months. But we are back and forth with them, getting answers, getting suggestions. I think we've got all the department heads we requested over the last year or so. They've given us their submissions to this, and we expect within the next month or so, probably right after budget season, that we will be able to put this on the fire actually and bring it in front of everybody.
Yeah. At least from our perspective, we feel the Corporation Counsel has provided us with an excellent draft to present within the Ethics Board itself. We've been discussing the draft because we would like to bring closure to it as soon as possible too. It becomes rather complex, and it's always good to get input and we can learn from each other. I forwarded the Macomb Township ordinance because there's things that we can learn from that the board may want to consider to incorporate in any revision. So there has been a lot of communication by and between the board and the Corporation Counsel as well as yourself, Commissioner. So I think the communication is great. We feel good that it seems to be coming to a final conclusion. We don't feel that it's necessary to have an outside counsel draft and go through that expense of drafting an ethics ordinance when we have something that we took enrolled ordinance 2016. We enhanced it. We put our input, recommendations into it from a variety of different sources. And we would like to submit that to you when we feel it would be appropriate, and then to act upon it. But you're the legislators, we're the department, we're just merely making the recommendations.
Well, there's one of the confusions right there. We were not all collectively aware of the communication. So there was discussion quite a while ago. We've had a lot on our plate. There's been a lot on our plate, and it would be easy for something like that to just fall through the cracks. Commissioner Sauger.
All I like to say is that I don't think there's a county in this state has a better chairman of their ethics board than we have. Because I've known Dr. Amboyer for many years, very brilliant man, and what you tell me, I take to church. Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you. There are actually no questions about the budget. We do understand that you made some concessions, and I think that given everything you've heard, but that's greatly appreciated.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay.
Please vote.
Thank you. Okay.
Motion passes 10-0. Okay, next we have Corp Counsel, and I'm going to seek a motion to receive and file. Moved by Sauger, supported by Ha. Hello, John.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you very much. This is the neutral budget. The only substantive changes in my proposed 2020 budget over the 2019 budget are occasioned by changes in the CBAs and pay scales and an increase in my share of the shared services fees. Yes, we're one of the departments that generate that, and we still pay it. Happy to ask any questions that you have.
I don't see. Oh, okay, Chair Smith.
Thank you. Thanks, John.
Yes.
Hey, I just want to follow up from, when did we hire another corp counsel? Was it last year that we hired?
Two years ago. Peter's been with us a little over 2 years, I think, so.
Okay, and I know it takes a little while to realize all this, but at the time, and I know you guys have been doing this, you've taken a lot more in-house.
All the labor work.
Right. Is there a way to quantify that, like, basically how much we were spending on outside counsel versus how much we're saving now on outside counsel over maybe even just last year? Is that in the budget somewhere?
I think you'd have to do like historic research and past budgets. I know when
I would talk to
Eric,
Steve about it. I don't know if Steve.
prior HR director, Eric and I came up with the idea because Eric had a $50,000, I believe it was $50,000 line item in his budget for outside counsel for labor advice. And they overran that $50,000 every year by a considerable amount. So he suggested transferring that 50 to my budget. So it's kind of a neutral change between the two departments. And then I talked everybody into giving me enough extra to hire a dedicated labor counsel. And Peter's been with us over 2 years, two years and 4 months.
Well, it seems like your budget might be one of the few that said we would save money by doing this, and actually might have saved money by doing this. So I was just wondering if you guys have.
I can quantify what he does. I mean, the
No,
number of
not what he
cases,
does.
arbitrations.
Not what he does. I just don't know if Steve have the numbers, or if they can get them to us on what we used to spend on outside counsel as opposed to what we do now. Yeah.
Yeah, we can get those numbers. So what happened was.
I think this might have been a
happened-
really good move, is what I'm saying.
Right, exactly. So
Yeah.
what happened was what John indicated, plus we were able to decrease the chargeback to the departments for liability insurance because we were paying those outside attorneys out of the liability insurance fund. But I think I may have given you data a year ago, but I'll update it and provide it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Duge.
Thank you very much. I understand where you're coming from on this, but I think it'd be really difficult to get true up-to-date numbers because it's based on the cases that he has. How much involvement did you have with our previous clerk Let's, just for the sake of argument.
Well, I will use perhaps an impermissible colloquialism and say our previous clerk was a 17-month time suck for my entire office.
Yes.
Total dominance of every spare and not spare second. that
Well,
we had.
and that's the point that I'd like to, if we're going to compare apples to apples, that, I don't think it's possible. And I'm not a lawyer and I don't play one on TV. But that being said, is there some savings? Probably. But to get it right down to the nitty gritty, I don't think it's possible. Well, all right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And for the record, if we're comparing apples to apples, it might be possible, but if we're comparing apples to oranges, I'm just teasing with you, Andre. Okay, so my question is,
Yes.
and it may be Steve, we just dramatically increased the money for attorneys for HR. And you were talking about money that was transferred in your office for a labor attorney, and I'm wondering if it's specifically because it's 312, or what are we talking about, Steve?
I think I'm going to defer to Andy on that. It's more specific to 312, but I think Andy's more the expert to answer that question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I'm glad you're still here.
Commissioner. Yes, absolutely.
Oh, I haven't done him. Have I done him? Yeah, I haven't done him yet. Geez, I thought it was to the end. Go ahead. No, I'm joking.
I
Go ahead.
appreciate the question, and as we discussed in the workshop prior, and now we have all the commissioners here with us, or all of the commissioners, other commissioners are here with us. That is specifically for 312, because that can be such a cost generator, and it's such a narrow area of the law. We utilize Peter a ton, and I know that he has plenty of work to do in Mr. Shapka's office. So we're looking at that very narrow area of the law.
Okay, and I don't see any other people requesting to speak? Okay, please vote. Yeah, see, I thought I was at the end. I'm just itching to, yes, I was doing wishful thinking. Motion passes 9-0. So thank you, John, and with that, we will now do Human Resources and Labor Relations with Director McKinnon. And let me go ahead and get a motion to receive and file by Hawes, supported by Duche. Okay, thank you. No, when I said thank you, if you would like to start, I'm sorry. There's a bunch of stuff going on over here. I apologize for that.
I'm not a teacher by training. I wasn't waiting for everybody to be quiet. I just didn't know when it was my turn. So thank you very much. Thank you for the time today. I very much appreciate it. I know this has already been a little bit of a long meeting, so I will try to be brief. We continue to try to work hard in the Human Resources and Labor Relations Department, and with this board's blessing, we were able to increase compensation in the county this year, and that was a great benefit for our staff, and we greatly appreciate it in my department, and I know our staff greatly appreciates it out there in the field. We'll continue to try to do everything we can to make this a engaging, pleasant, comfortable place to work, and with that, I'm open for any questions that you may have. One small piece, we continue to look at benefits. I know that Commissioner Drolet is frequently talking to us about benefits. We're looking at benefits, and I would like to get a small group of folks together from collective bargaining agreements and then people within our county structure to look at that for the next contract. We won't be looking at that so much for the upcoming contract, but for 2023, we have to do something before then to make sure that our benefit costs are in line.
Okay, thank you. Chair Smith.
Already
Okay,
answered.
I don't.
I feel like you should get a question or two, since everybody else has.
Sure.
Thanks. I'm going to bring up what Commissioner Kleinfeld brought up the other day about certain non-union positions and whether, we don't have to get into the whole study, but I understand like maybe only 53% of the county was actually studied and the other 45% or so close was not, right? So am I correct or close on that?
No, you're correct and close, yes. You're also not correct and close. It's a little bit more complex, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
So it's 53% of the overall population of positions out there. So 53% of our
Of the
actual
positions.
faces
Oh,
were studied.
Individuals.
Were surveyed.
Positions.
So 97 positions were surveyed, which accounts for 53% of the individual faces.
Okay.
So it's not 53% of positions, it's
much-
53% of people.
how much, can you equate it to positions? Like what percentage of positions was actually looked at then?
It depends on which ones were vacant and haven't been used for a long time. It's much more difficult, but it's a much
Higher.
smaller percentage of positions.
Oh, okay.
I think we had something like a position for every 3 individual staff members that we had.
Right.
So if you think we have 2,800 staff members, I don't do math, so 2,800 divided by 3.
So I can only speak for our department, but I know Patty had emailed something back in May, before I think the red circle, or whatever the determinations came out, to talk about like where their positions were being. So I'm gonna just talk about my positions, our positions here that aren't union, that were really not studied, and they were taken into your hands, and you guys decided where they fit. I'm just wondering, I think it would, and granted, it's probably a major undertaking, but this whole thing is, that it might have been a good idea, and I would have wished that you would have come to me and we could have put a little group together here to discuss, like, where do they really fall, right? I mean, where as a group, do they fit within this category, or do they fit within this category? Because I will say that many of us think that at least our top 2 positions were undervalued. How's that? And it's just a communication. I know it's kind of arbitrary, right? I mean, because there's not an exact study done on them. But I would say that I would have wished, and I don't know where this goes from the future, though, that when we talk about these type of positions, that you would come to the departments. And I don't know if you went to other departments to say, well, exactly what do these do? So before we actually put them in this category or that category, I'd like to have a little more input.
Yep. So
could you
we
speak-
did. We got together with all the departments throughout the county, including the Board of Commissioners, I believe, where we were provided this hierarchical structure. That structure led us to drive the actual positions and where they were going to be set throughout the county. I believe on August 28th, we also got together. I think, I'm trying to remember, but it was August 28th of 2018, I saw it on my calendar. We had gotten together with a small group up here. I think, Commissioner, you may have been there, and maybe Patty Dibb, myself, Brian Jacks, and Amy Lametta. And we looked at the positions and which ones were green, which ones were red. We had a little spreadsheet on that. So I believe we got together on that August 28th of 2018 is my calendar is saying that.
Okay.
You know, I don't remember what I do every day. So that's a year and a half ago. So that's a long time.
All right.
But that was prior to us implementing that study. Of course, some positions were negotiated. Within your department in particular, we have a chief of staff position, and we have other chief of staff positions throughout the county. One is in the Health and Community Services Division. That is the exact same pay grade as, you know, we did not pick and choose individuals.
Right. And I would just say to Veronica's point yesterday, most chief of staffs don't have 13 bosses, which makes it a little more interesting. But I'm just wondering, in the future, for any department, including ours, if we think that study may need to be tweaked, is that something we could ask you to come and sit down and talk with us about?
Yeah, we always we have now a system with which we can look at positions.
Mm-hmm.
We look at educational requirements, experience requirements, budgetary requirements, ability to act independently. There's a system now that we'll be looking at positions to assign them to those different pay grades. And that's one of the things that we were provided from Seagull Waters that we're really, really grateful for, because before it was just a dartboard, right? You'd take a look at this person, they do a great job. We'd like to honor that a little bit more, so we're going to bump them up. But how much do we bump them up? We have a better system of doing that now, and I'm really appreciative of the predecessors to myself for allowing us to move forward with that.
Great.
And just further complicating that is not speaking to the union positions, but historically, I guess for the at-will employees, because you work for the county executive and we keep this separate thing, that there are things in his budget that we don't interfere with. His budget for his office, not the whole thing. Obviously, we do the budget process for everything. But there were things in our office that we didn't think his office. So it's just an unusual thing. I'm not saying what's right or what's wrong, but you know that because we already discussed that aspect of it. Commissioner Ha.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Andrew, first I'd like to congratulate you on a cost-neutral budget. Been doing that with the department heads as they come forward. And secondly, I'd like to congratulate you as well as the amount of information that you put out over email with the programs that are being offered, the transparency, the times, places. I don't know what your predecessor did, but a good part of your day's got to be there monitoring what you're putting out on that email. So thank you for all that as well.
Yeah. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't see any other speakers, so please vote.
Very much appreciate the time. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you for waiting. Motion passes 10-0. Finance Department. Hi, Steve.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. What's that? We had a mismatch. Oh, you took yours off. Okay. Anyway, good afternoon, Commissioners. Again, here to talk about the Finance Department budget. Finance Department also includes purchasing and equalization, and I have Larry Lee and Jeff Dorowski from the Purchasing Department here. They'll speak about purchasing separately, and Kristen Seeloff from Equalization will speak about her budget separately as well. Relative to the Finance Department, as you know, we have about 22 people in the Finance Department. There's 16 or 16 and a half positions in purchasing and 10 in Equalization Department for a total of a little over 48. Within the Finance Department ourselves, we have the accounting and auditing function, we have payroll, we have budgeting, we have what I call special projects, which is mostly support of the One Solution accounting system, and then we have risk management. So probably the largest thing that we're going through right now in 2019, that's going to flow into 2020 as a goal, is we're going through a major upgrade to the One Solution system. And as part of that, we're going through what's called the business process review. So we're bringing folks in from the vendor, and they're sitting down with us to talk about how we do things in the system. How do we do purchasing? How do we do budgeting? How do we do payroll? How do we do contract management, for example? I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So what we're hoping to get out of that whole process is learning how we can use the system more efficiently. And we've had the system for about 17 years. Admittedly, don't like to admit this, but we don't really use the system to its full capacity. We would like to make the budget process a little more streamlined. It's admittedly clunky at this point in time. We use Excel spreadsheets and things like that. I'd like to get to a point where the departments are actually inputting their budget requests into the system. And then we can produce reports on a more real-time basis and that sort of thing. And as well, as part of this upgrade, I would like to implement the contract management module. We've had that for a while. I think the vendor has gone through 4 ownerships since we've had the system. We finally are, so Steve and I went to the National GFOA conference in May of this year. They had a very, very large display. We're excited about the look and feel of the system, and the benefit of doing contract management through the system, obviously, is you can connect purchase orders with vendors, with contracts. You can track change orders and kind of get that process down a little bit more concise and for everybody's satisfaction. So that's what we're going through now. That implementation will probably take a year. Business process review is in process. Hopefully by the end of the year we'll have some feedback from that as well. HR is going through the same process with the vendor because the payroll modules and HR modules are part of the same system. As it relates to the budget itself for 2020, you'll notice that there's a very, very small increase for the benefit of the commissioners who were not in the workshop. Our personnel expense is only going up less than half a point. It's about 0.4%. There's two things going on with there. There were increases as part of the compensation and classification study, although about 50% of the positions in my office were redlined. But there were still some increases, mostly the lower level of the clerical folks. And then, unfortunately, we had a death in the department during the year after a long illness. And so we took a look at that position and we were able to eliminate it. So we feel that we have staff on board that can absorb the work. That person's going to work mainly in the risk management area. So that's mainly why our budget's really not going up much at all. So we took a look at things and we eliminated a position.
Thank you, Steve. I like the term red line too. It just rolls off easier than red circle.
And every department's different. We just happen to have about 50% of our positions happen to be red line. Not 50% of the people, but 50% of the positions.
So we don't have any speakers, so if you want to go ahead and make the introductions and do Kristen.
Actually, you do.
Oh, am I on the? I'm sorry if I forget to press the button. I apologize, Commissioner Duche.
Thank you. Hello. Hi, Steve.
Hello, Commissioner.
Getting rid of people, that's not the way you do it. That being said.
I would rather not. But,
yes.
But
two things that you said. That the program you have is 7 years old.
17.
Even better.
2003.
How is it working on the systems that we have?
We go through upgrades. I think I was here a year ago saying we were going through an upgrade. Seems like about every year and a half, we're going through an upgrade. Either a database platform changes or something.
Well, it's that 17, if you will, that threw me. That how is it compatible with
upgrades and upgrades?
Are you running into the same stuff IT is as far as upgrading systems because they don't run the old stuff?
To a degree. I mean, we can change databases. You might have Windows 10 compatibility issues. But I think that goes across many departments and many different software platforms. It's not something specific to one solution system.
Okay, so it's not that part specific.
No,
I'm still shocked that you've got a program that's working for 17 years.
Yeah, it's been
That's
2002 is when we purchased it. When we went live January 1st of 2003. Payroll went live April 7th or something of 2006.
Do you expect this to go for 20 years or more?
Well, we're 17 into it, so
yeah.
I don't see why not. I mean, I think what happened was there was a company that was in California that was the vendor we bought it from. It was built specific for public sector. It was bought out by a larger nationwide firm. That firm was bought out, and now another firm.
But I just find it amazing.
We're excited. I like the look and feel of it. There will be dashboards for departments. There will be, I think, this input of the data directly by the departments for their budget will be very, very significant in my mind. I'm excited about it.
Thank you, Steve. I've never heard of a program being around for 17 years.
And I'm really excited about the business process review as well.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chair Smith.
Thank you. Come on, Andre, you're still using your flip phone from 17 years ago, right? Steve, I have to ask you this question, and I'm hoping that maybe this new system will give us a different answer. But for all the years we've been here, we've had a contracting, purchasing policy, and we've heard from the executive's office before it was too confusing or this or that or the other thing, even though I will say that I heard our corporation counsel say that our purchasing and contracting policy are, in his words, bone-crushingly clear. Will this new system allow you to put parameters in where when people are spending?
That's the hope. That's the hope. Is the main issue we have today?
Were you doing it?
The main,
Somebody else, come on.
the main complication we have, or the
fire's
main
lighting.
hurdle we have today is tracking cumulative spending. That's kind of a problem with the system as is today. And we've talked to the vendor during this business process review about how we can connect, again, purchase orders with vendor records, with change orders and contract modules, and put limits on not being able to spend more than what's in a contract, kind of a thing. So that's my hope, Commissioner, is we can kind of rein that in.
All right, thanks.
Okay, there are no other speakers, so do you want to go ahead and make your
Yeah,
introductions?
Kristen's budget is next.
Good afternoon. Pleasure to be here. I understand that I am not a budget neutral department. You're done. Sorry for that. And there's a couple reasons for that. For my employees, we're shown on the wage compensation study to be slightly below market. And so because I only have 10 and 40% of them were being increased, that's quite a significant change for my department. But good news, that means I'll keep my good employees and they won't leave to go someplace else. So that's great news. The other thing that's on there, and I'm not sure if I was the $6,000, $7,000 item that was brought up at the beginning of the meeting today. I've been coming to you guys for 4 years now, talking about my goal to make a countywide database of all of the information from all the local unit databases in one. And we did that this year, and I was very excited to tell you about that back in the spring. With that comes responsibility. In the past, we've had several companies. There's 2 or 3 of them. Zillow is one that always inquires but never buys. Black Knight buys every year. In the past, we've only had very, very limited data to be able to provide to those different companies looking for the public data, and now I can give them everything. It's a one-stop shop in equalization. They don't have to go to the local units anymore. So with that, the time it takes to compile that data is much longer, but they like it. And after speaking with Frank Creature in regards to the FOIA fees and all of that, we decided to increase that fee from $3,500 to $7,000. And what a wonderful year it was. We actually had 2 $7,000 checks this year rather than the $3,500 that normally comes in each year, so that's wonderful. But that's the good thing about this database. It's going to bring some more revenue to the general fund. The bad thing is I have to learn how to use it. Because like Steve indicated with his software and everything, the way that I do my work on behalf of you all, because you all remember that I work for him, for you, I have to do all of these reports, and I do everything in Excel spreadsheets, and they're all linked together, and God help me if one of those links breaks, because then it all completely breaks down. And so the more knowledge and training that I get on this program, the better answers that I can provide for all of you, for all of the other departments, for our taxpayers and everything. So that is the additional training. It's not increased employee training, it's increased director training so that I can do something with this thing now that it's been populated with some information.
Yeah, the 7,000, I don't think was with respect to the training. It was with respect to an issue that we had wrong information on, and Steve clarified it in between the 2 meetings.
Okay.
So it wasn't about the training that came up. That's an easy one.
Good.
Okay, so I don't see any speakers to talk to Kristen. Well, no, we've got one. We've got one more presentation. What did you say? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Jim. Commissioner Carabali.
Thank you. Thank you. We do not contract anymore with any assessing services?
No, and it is my intention to never, ever do that. But no, I think the one time that we did, we had an issue where the assessor passed away. And we have quite a few level 4 units in this county, and that particular one required a level 4. And so Steve Mellon, my predecessor, was able to fulfill that obligation.
Is that Utica?
No, Utica, I believe he did on the side. And while he was employed as the equalization director, there was a time, he did that before he was the equalization director, but there was a time when, I believe during the fire, that our staff wasn't able to do our stuff. And so they did go over and help Utica with some picture projects and other things, because it was better to have them out there doing something than just sitting idle.
Okay,
But I will overbid as long as you all allow me, and as long as this man behind me allows me. I will overbid every single one to not do assessing,
Okay.
because I don't understand it.
Then you clarify that, because I thought we contracted, maybe before you were here, I thought we contracted with Utica. Or maybe just he contracted, I don't know.
He contracted, but as
his
long as
personal
I've been
time.
around.
Okay.
As long as I've been around, the gal that did Mount Clemens also did. That was kind of the thing. Mount Clemens and Utica went together, and she's been gone for quite a few years now, too.
Okay,
So.
you just purchased, and I apologize, I don't have it in front of me, $15,000 for some software for going out and measuring in the field? Or you're going to be purchasing?
We wanted to, but I understand that there are, cuts and all of that stuff. What this would be through the IT budget, I believe. So what that was, there are tools and technology out there where we can go to a property, enter the information, measure it, enter it, and do everything, throw it up in the cloud, come back, and it's there, done. And what that does is it provides us with the ability to get even more field work done instead of having to spend so much time in the office. I have not been updated.
It hasn't been approved yet, we're
Yeah,
discussing it.
it's a wish list. It is a wonderful, wonderful thing, because my people are the ones that are out there finding the money, and if they can do their job quicker, faster, better, more accurately, then we're just able to provide better answers.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and with that, we don't have any other, what? Oh, you snuck that in.
can't help it.
Honest to God, in the last
He
1
always
second,
likes to ask me
you snuck that in.
questions.
Commissioner Dujek.
Thank you. Yes. Are you does remonumentation answer to you?
No.
Just a clerk and that's it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't get to do anything but
I
equalization.
don't know why I thought
which
you were
like.
involved in remonumentation also.
Yeah, no. Never.
Thank you.
Okay. Steve, would you like to make the introductions for the next one?
Larry Lee, the purchasing manager.
Purchasing.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Should I put a white flag up since purchasing's been talked about quite a bit? So hopefully make this quick. As you see, purchasing's not asking for much. The couple increases that we're asking is literally just cost of business. So with that said, I'll open it up for questions.
No questions?
Hey.
What a fabulous job you did. Either that or you went last and people are tired of asking questions.
Jay, do you want to add something last? No? Perfect.
Are you responsible for remonumentation?
Nope. So, all right then.
That's it, that's everything, right? Yeah. We've got a motion and support. Please vote. Oh, that's me. I didn't eat my Wheaties this morning. Sorry about that. Motion, I thought I pressed it. Motion passes 9-0. Thank you all. Okay, correspondence, Health Department budget follow-up of information. I need a motion to receive and file. Moved by Romano, supported by Kraft. Please vote. I swear I pressed it. Okay, that wasn't me. Motion passes 9-0. New business, does anyone have any? Commissioner Ha.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This afternoon, a couple of us met with our county treasurer, Commissioner Brown, Leonetti, myself, and Leon came in late. The subject was Martha Teaberry. Without speaking for the other commissioners, I think I could summarize it. We didn't get a clear path on how to help with the current critical situation that they're in. There were options discussed, very informative. Don invited corporate legal in there, which definitely helped out with things that had transpired in the past and the whys and wherefore. So at this particular juncture in time, needless to say, we don't have a solution. And I would ask for concurrence from my colleague over there.
No solution's imminent. We got a difficult situation on our hands. Thank you.
Any other new business? Okay, public participation, seeing none, we'll close public participation. Motion to adjourn by Duje, supported by Kraft. Please vote, and we're adjourned.